Hey, everybody. I'm David Bloom with Next TMT Talks and Next TMT. I'm here with my co founder, colleague, and long suffering fellow writer, journalist, etc., Dan Frankel. We are here to talk about all things TMT, that is technology, media, and telecom. And Dan being more the telecom sort, me being, I don't know what I do. That being said, another interesting week, despite the fact that we are cruising into 4th of July weekend and a whole lot of indifference for anything other than a big ugly bill and maybe some savior stuff for the California Film Tax Incentive Program. But Dan, let's get started if we could.
Tell you that flower. I don't know the name of behind the blue one.
Hydrangea.
Hydrangea has a very symbiotic relationship with the tiger swallowtail butterfly that carries its pollen and does its reproductive magic. A little factoid from the San Fernando Valley that you may or may not know.
I am fascinated to hear that. I see a lot of butterflies here in South Santa Monica and on the tough side of Santa Monica. But the swallowtail butterfly, I'll keep my eye open because we have certainly been blessed with overly fecund hydrangea in my neighborhood, and that's a great thing. So I'm happy about that. But well, they have a lot of flowers and they're gorgeous. As this photo from out front of our complex suggests that I took recently. Anyway, I like it more than our Next TMT potted plant, which you have, and it's perfectly fine. I just don't like the comparison to me because it tends to be not good. But looks great next to you. And for me, with a name like Bloom, I got to have flowers, dude. So anyway, here we are.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. Well explained. So what's on your mind this week, Dave?
Actually, the first thing, and we did not get into this in our column. This will be a shorter session than usual because we have some minor technical challenges. But the thing that caught my eye that we did not get into in the newsletter, and the newsletter is free for all who want to see it, sponsored again this week by Wintour, the operating system for televisions, connected TVs from the trade desk. Thank you guys for your support. But fascinated to see CBS that the Pac-12 lives. They found one more football member to get to the magic number of 8.
Wow.
We won't get into Pac-12,
by any other name,
any of that stuff. And they technically have 9 schools because they have Gonzaga as a non-football school during basketball season. So, but the important thing from a making it matter is that CBS cut a deal for the football championship game, which of course the 2 surviving members of the old Pac-12, Washington State, Oregon State, right. But a bunch of other Western teams, not many of them anywhere close to the Pacific, but that's kind of neither here nor there these days. I mean, when you've got the Big Ten from New Jersey to Los Angeles, even the SEC is basically from Austin to Gainesville to, it's sort of the geographic stuff doesn't matter that much. But
it's an incoherent place. I mean, I get the change has to happen when you inject billions of dollars of media money into the equation. They couldn't keep going the way it was. I accept that. But
no. What it doesn't mean you can't rue the loss of the traditional rivalries and being able to hop in your car on a road trip when you're a college kid and be at your arch rivals, well, not UCLA, USC, but you could get to a lot of Pac-10 games back in the day, Pac-12 games back in the day, 3 years ago, pretty easily. You run up the coast to see Stanford or Berkeley or Cal, or whatever, Arizona State, for instance, but not anymore. So this is just what it is. But congrats to the Pac-12, such as it may be, for the deal with CBS. I think that's fine. And of course, there's money. So they're going to have the football championship game. They're going to have the basketball.
We can find some room, maybe lose a few. Well, don't go through my stuff, but
anyway, that being said, so that's great.
I read that Anna Wintour is Anna Wintour.
Anna Wintour, yeah, she's known.
Define culture and style is well, she's vacating her editor-in-chief job, which I don't know really if that matters that much. I mean,
It doesn't matter. Cy Newhouse is dead. Condé Nast is a battered version of its old self. Graydon Carter is running his own little.
Going to be a director. She'll still have a director level role. I mean.
Well, she's the editorial director of all the magazines in a time when very few people read magazines. Vogue gets read in September, when it's still a 600-page, kill your mail carrier sized issue. But right. Who else is doing that? Wired is more Wired than ever, but there's not it used to be a really gorgeous book. I remember buying the second issue of Wired on a newsstand on Fairfax Avenue in like 1994 or something. And it was beautiful. It was really interesting what they did with the product as a print document for a publication focused on the future of media and technology. That being said, magazine's still there. Anna Wintour still got a gig. I'm sure she's riding a town car to work every day, but it ain't like it used to be. My old college chum, Brian Burrow, at the University of Missouri, world's finest journalism school, hired straight out of school at the Wall Street Journal. Graydon Carter's first hire when he took over at Vanity Fair was Brian, who had written Barbarians at the Gate, the sort of seminal look inside the RGR Nabisco.
Sure. I think James Garner cited the movie.
And then so Brian wrote a pretty amusing memoir about Graydon Carter's memoir for the Yale Review, I don't know, a month ago, in which he talked about there was a time when it was insane at that place in terms of the pay for those blessed few journalists who were working there. Brian said he'd gotten to a point after he kind of proved himself out. I mean, he was already a well-known commodity, but he kind of proved himself out. He was basically under contract to produce three, uno, dos, tres, stories a year for a price that was shockingly precise. It was something like $498,512.
Right.
And, we'll round it up to 500 because that's what you do. Because it also included like bottomless expense account and all the rest. So that era, long gone.
I had exposure to that. I worked at Weeder Publications, which was based in
Right.
It was not too long after I graduated.
So all the protein powder you could ask for, right?
It was a milkshake Arnold Schwarzenegger would pull up because he was a friend of Mr. Weeder, who was a big fitness innovator in the U.S. at one point.
Muscle and Fitness wasn't that one of the big publications?
It was. Men's Fitness is what I worked for. Muscle and Fitness. Flex was in that group, which was an extreme bodybuilder kind of thing. And we had the most glamorous was Shape, which had a lot of satellite publications that had to do with fitness and lifestyle for women. Very successful. In that kind of, Joe spent a lot of money getting kind of New York level talent to come in and edit the publications. And they would bring in creative directors who were washed out and couldn't get jobs at Condé Nast anymore, but they still had kind of Condé Nast taste. We had this one creative director who did this photo shoot on a boat and came back with I think expense account was like $90,000, and everybody looked. But this is the scale and the largesse with which that culture kind of.
Well, in the magazine era, which is now as far gone as the newspaper era, and at the rate things are going, the movie studio business. I was Friday at this UCLA Entertainment Symposium. Dana Walden, the heiress apparent to the Bob Iger throne at Disney, was up there, I think, mostly because Ken Zifrin, whose institute at UCLA's law school puts on this symposium. And so he got her to come do it, even though I'm sure in every cell in her body was saying, don't go.
Yeah, we'll talked about. Let me just quickly get the bundling thing out of the way.
I'll get the bundling thing out of the way, but I just was amused
kind of a big thing of the week.
Yeah,
I agree. And she touched on it. It was just at a time where streaming is all about alliances and where you can find traction and leverage and consumers. But
I was going to say you talked about the customer service at Charter, which is through the roof. I've had good experiences with them too, and those are not words that go together. Good customer service and cable provider, those traditionally didn't go together, but it does feel like they got the bejesus scared out of them by fixed wireless.
I think Comcast did too. I mean, they this week they announced that they're getting rid of data caps, and they've got all this. They've basically a reinvigorated, rethought high-speed internet product line with cheaper prices, whole home Wi-Fi. You used to have to pay for like all these extra gizmos. Now it's all part of the package. So I think they're responding. I think the customer service for T-Mobile, which I put in the little screed in our newsletter this week. Bad experience. I talked to 7 reps, and the first 6 told me, if you want to transfer a service to another user, which I did. I wanted my son wanted to move out of his apartment and go to another
Anyway,
one.
you wanted to transfer a service, and
Right.
it proved to be requiring both the transferee and the modem.
And by the time I got the information, the modem's back in Santa Barbara. Now to return it, I have to drive way up to Santa Barbara. It reminded me of all the other times I had really bad experiences with T-Mobile. And I don't have these experiences with, at least I have one cable company I deal with, Charter, and it's quite good. They have what they call repatriated customer service base with, I don't want to be an ethnocentric American, but when you speak the same language, it does make execution of customer service a lot easier.
While all those bundles are going on, Dana Walden, the possible heiress apparent to take over for Bob Iger, if he ever decides to retire, I'm skeptical, but supposedly they'll make an announcement in the year, and then he'll probably be chairman for a year. That worked so well the last time. Just ask Bob Chapek. And then the other person takes over. But she's considered kind of the inside thing, but she agreed to be on stage being, I won't say grilled, but gently interviewed by Ken Zifrin, one of the biggest entertainment law attorneys in town for the last, 50 years,
Sure.
But known to her as the father of her whom she's known since she was 14, and he was the father of her friend Lauren. So you can expect just really ripping hard questions, right? But he said in response to that Disney bundle, so you got 100% of what you wanted, and at much less cost than anybody expected. And she just quickly said, you said it.
Right.
It's like, thank you, Ken, for being my spokesman so I can get it out there without getting it out there. But
it sounds like it was a pretty interesting day. I mean, she's a pretty influential.
Yeah, and could be more so.
Business, and you had, Michael Nathanson was there.
Well, Nathanson was not there and very apologetic. I guess he was there physically there last year. He was having to pipe it in from the East Coast. Promises to be back next year. But I did about 30 minutes of, rock'em sock'em, data, and great, fantastic. Michael's friend of the show and somebody we regularly quote. And he was just heaping the so great news onto the assembled mass of lawyers that were there, because this is from the law school and Zifrin's Institute there at the law school at UCLA.
Yeah.
But, it's interesting because program spending has been down since the peak of 2022, not expected to top those numbers until 2027, according to Nathanson, and only because of sports spending, because everything else is down 1% overall across Hollywood. I mean, there's a bunch of conversation. Dee Dee Myers, who's helping the governor's package to goose up, state filming incentives, partly was passed on Friday. More will get passed in the next several days. Part of the reason that these incentives are so direly needed is the economy of the film business, the local working film business is falling apart. And there's a lot of competition for people to take their production somewhere else. And so they're making a big overhaul, and it's a lot better. It'll probably be fully subscribed. And we still got a problem here. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I think it's going to get worse. I mean, the state is going to need money, and I don't know how they're going to give a lot of rebates to major industry. But
well, they got to pick their spots. The reason why this particular approach works is because it is for really the below the line costs.
Right.
And that means all the union workers. So all the unions like IATSE and Cinematographers Guild and all the rest who are not on camera got out there and pushed it because it's a way to help support union jobs. Some of the things it doesn't do are pay for any portion of the cost of post-production, which typically is in shops that are not unionized. So they don't get that goose. And so it's interesting to see where it is, where it isn't. This could have been a bigger bill, Meyer said, but the Trump tariff stuff took what was going to be a $6 billion state budget surplus and turned into a $12 billion state deficit. And, that's not nothing, even in a state as big as California, which I think is now officially the fourth largest economy in the world.
Yeah.
Turns out these are really good jobs and you really like to take care of them. And we also
stuff is dizzying. I learned something that I didn't even know the other day. On Monday, Canada is going to start collecting from U.S. technology companies that,
right,
like Meta, Google, Amazon, anybody who operates a digital marketplace or a social network or sells online advertising and makes $20 million or more a year in Canada.
Is that Canadian dollars? Because that's actually only like
I don't know that.
million American.
I think the Americans are calculating that it's $3 billion a year in taxes. And Trump cut off negotiations abruptly on Friday with Canada for a new trade deal, with this being the catalyst, he said.
Well, the alleged catalyst, whatever, it's part of the dance. I call it the taco tariff shuffle because it just feels like,
right,
let me know the bottom line whenever you get to that, because it's really not useful to spend a lot of energy on it otherwise. It's frustrating for anybody trying to understand what's happening. A few other things going on besides your trip up the coast to go modem retrieving and eating at a fantastic hole-in-the-wall Mexican joint in Santa Barbara, an incredibly rich town.
It's actually Mario. This place has excellent sopes. And if we had time, I'd fish it off my phone. It's
we'll
a shout out next week.
It'll be something it'll be like a Where's Waldo kind of thing for next week's couple.
Come for the flautas, stay for the.
Come for the flautas, stay for the sopas. Roku also, I have to say, it's really interesting because, they did this deal. We talked about it last week mostly, but Laura Martin and the folks and Dan Medina over at Needham and Company, I did a little look at it and found several things to really like about what its implications are.
Right.
For Roku, most importantly, they said this deal's probably 3 years. It's kind of typical, but this might be Amazon kicking the tires on buying Roku. If you're trying to corner the US TV advertising market, and there is no way they are not, right?
Yeah, you would have. I think they're not second place. I think it's Samsung, but they have market share too with Fire TV.
Yeah, they've got their own 100. They've sold 118 million devices supposedly, according to Laura. Not bad, pretty good. Right. 14 years, 118 million. What is that? It's 8 million a year, something like that. So not bad. More than I sell in a year.
And smart TV with Roku's in North America, it's absolutely dominant.
Yeah. So build versus buy. This feels like a really obvious one. The only issue would be, okay, Bezos probably fine with Trump. He was at the inauguration. He can lob some more stuff in. If they want to buy Roku, they don't have any news organizations to lever with specious lawsuit, stuff. This could happen.
I can't imagine. If you evaluate competition in connected TV, it's a problem. You could probably do the percentages and suggest a different administration with actual rules that apply governance as opposed to ideology. It might be a problem, but I can see it sailing through. Roku's not a liability politically, so why not?
No, and they've got some presence outside the United States, but basically they're 85% and 90% of their viewership is in the United States, and they've done great. And they've done great with Roku Channel, turning that into a real moneymaker for them with high margin dollars. But in a different administration, that deal doesn't happen. This one, it could. Yeah. Our governor here in the state of California sued Fox for something that looks kind of like what Trump sued 60 Minutes over. Kind of interesting.
Fox News for $787 million is which was the exact sum that they settled with Dominion Voting for.
That's what the number was. I couldn't remember what it was. It's like, this sounds like an Elon 420 kind of number. And I couldn't remember what it was, but right, that was the Dominion settlement total, right?
Yeah, he has absolutely no leverage over Fox News, so we may never hear about this again. But it was interesting that it happened.
Right. Well, they could cause some problems, but you're right. They have no leverage for now. We'll see. I mean, clearly the governor is trying to batten down lots of hatches, reach out across aisles in various ways with his podcast and other things to folks who might be open to a broader take on partisanship, et cetera, et cetera. So some of this is sort of hard not to go, oh, another step.
Interesting week in the news media. You had the president lashing out at CNN and New York Times for publishing leaked information that the bombing campaign of Iran may have not have achieved its objective, at least not.
But it's important to note that leaked information was the Defense Department's own initial assessment.
Right.
It wasn't just random Peace Institute saying you didn't do anything. It was the DOD. And then they went on a rampage, not quite at the murderous level of the Iranian government after the bombings, where they've been executing people and imprisoning others.
Persian Gulf, which I thought was kind of
cool.
And it's good to see after the head of 60 Minutes was disposed of, its correspondents rose together and demanded to George Cheeks, one of the co-CEOs of Paramount Global, that he hire is the executive producer, Bob Simon, his daughter. I forgot her name.
Tanya Simon. She's been the number 2 there for many years and has been the interim since her predecessor stepped down. He didn't.
Well, that tells me they're still engaged and they care about what's going to happen.
Yeah. I remember Scott Pelley in Dallas 30 years ago when we were both working there, and he was a pretty solid character back then. So a little square jawed.
So cowed. I mean, if you watch a broadcast, they dance around the elephant in the room so much. It's kind of sad to watch. So I'm hoping at some point when this all dies down, they're able to kind of report news again and talk about the president.
Yeah.
What do we call the president? Our only president.
Our only president, as I like to call him, our OOP. That being said, you close the newsletter with a little note that James Dolan, our favorite NBA franchise owner, may be holding up expansion. It is expected that the rest of the league desperately would like to add 2 more teams to get a nice round 32, which works for like tournaments and all that stuff, and brackets and division sizes and all that, and lots more money that would be paid into all the other folks. He doesn't want to share what he's already got. He doesn't play well with others, and he is blocking in some fashion expansion, which technically probably would bring franchises to Las Vegas and Seattle, which just watched its long lost love, now the Oklahoma City Thunder, win its first title. So
an ugly scene. Howard Schultz was complicit in it too. These carpetbaggers from Oklahoma came and stole their team. And I've had carpetbaggers from Oklahoma tell me that's not what happened. They've done wonderful things with it. We've talked about it in this forum. They're the way they can run their organization, select players is top notch. And they certainly they win a championship.
Yeah.
But the city of Seattle deserves an NBA franchise, and I hope they get it. And if James Dolan gets in the way of that, just one more reason to not buy JD and the Straight Shot tickets next time I'm in New Jersey.
Yeah, it's probably best. Probably best. But, others will, as they suck up to him to try to get courtside seats, and nobody apparently takes him up on it. Well, I think we should probably wrap this up. And now that we finally have a producer, we should wrap it up before she figures out all the dumbass things we just said.
She can make anything out of this goulash, somebody hire her.
That is why she is a magician, and it's also probably why you married her, because God knows what goulash you've come up with, buddy.
I made some mistakes, I like to think there's redemption.
All right, one can only hope. It's certainly something we can hope for all of us, a little redemption. And I think with that, this is David Bloom with Next TMT Talks and my colleague Daniel Frankel. We are sponsored this week by Wintour, the TV operating system from the Trade Desk. trying to provide a little bit of arm's length relationships while all the people we're talking about are trying to corner the market. So at least they seem like they're in a timely spot. But that being said, have a great drive to Santa Barbara, eat a fantastic meal, whether it's sopes in Santa Maria, or I would have gone with the tri-tip myself, but fantastic Mexican food on the south side of Santa Barbara, or whatever it is, as you tool along the coast in classic California summer style.